Hi, everybody. Corrine Smith here with number 14 in the episodes of this video series, Studying Thoreau, where I show off resources that you can use on your own to study the life and writings of American author and naturalist Henry David Thoreau. Today's topic is picture books. And sure, picture books are written for children. But you know what? They're also written for adults. No, because who's going to read it out loud first? An adult, right? And in the last 25 years specifically, quite a number of books, picture books, have been printed about our Henry. So today we are going to explore them. My name's Corrine Smith. I was a librarian for a long time, written a couple of books about Henry, really into books, really into Henry. I currently serve as the supervisor of the Thoreau Society shop at Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts. However, this is my own series, my own opinions of these books. And by now, you know I have opinions. And yes, you're going to hear about 2 pet peeves in this one, and also 1 non-recommendation. And that's coming right at the end. So you won't want to miss that. Otherwise, most of the books that I mention here are on travelswiththoreau.com under bibliography. You click on that and you click on picture books and you will find out where to get what I show you today, because a lot of them are sadly out of print and you'll have to get them from used book dealers. So the link is also in the summary below for your convenience. By far, the most popular picture book about Thoreau is Henry Hikes to Fitchburg by D.B. Johnson. Okay, I will be talking about this book and its 4 sequels in a little bit. But for right now, I want to share it as an example of what picture books have morphed into over the last 30 years, okay? They're usually this kind of size and shape. They are 32 pages long, exactly. Okay, so that's 14 double-page spreads, right? They are colorful. The amount of text on the page depends on who the audience is intended to be, you know, how old the children are supposed to be. Okay, very colorful. And of course, if it's a book that is true or based on a true character, a true person in history, then usually at the end there is a biography or, you know, an explanation of the history. And so that's pretty cool. And so usually we ought to talk about how publications like this happen too. Usually in the children's picture book world, there are 2 people who create them, an author and an illustrator. In this case, D.B. Johnson, whose first name is Don, hi Don, does both. But a lot of times publishers will pair a writer and an artist together, even though even if they haven't worked together before, to create a picture book. And another thing about picture books, I mentioned that a lot of the ones that I'm going to show you are out of print. Children's picture books especially seem to go out of print a lot. They come and go. And one of the reasons for that is that the print run is pretty small. When a publisher does a book, it's probably going to only print 3,000 copies, maybe no more than 5,000 copies. And so think of all the public libraries who do children's picture book story times, you know. I mean, there's more than 300 public libraries in Massachusetts alone. So you know, you cover the whole country, you know, everybody buys on, you know, people buy them. 3,000 to 5,000 copies can go pretty fast. And then when that print run is over, the publisher gets to decide, do they want to reprint the book? Do sales warrant it? And a lot of times, unfortunately, they decide that it doesn't. And yeah, that's a problem. Now, how can you tell what printing of the book that you've got? Okay, well, back in the day, you know, back in the 20th century and before, you could look at the publication page, and usually it's behind the title page, but in picture books, they often want to get right to the story, so they throw the publication page either before or at the very back. So you may have to look on a picture book where it is. Okay, so back in the day, they used to put like fifth printing 1973. But you know, every time they did that, if they reprinted the book, they'd have to add that line of text every time. So what the publishers as an industry decided to do is something that would be easier, a series of numbers, so that every time they reprint the book, all they have to do is take away the lower number. That sounds cool. So there's this little secret printing key here that you may never have seen, or you just didn't know what it was. And usually it says 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. And the lowest number is which printing it is. So if it goes all the way down to 1, it is the first edition, the first printing. Okay. On my hardback copy of Henry Hikes to Fitchburg, you see here, it goes down to 5. So this is the 5th printing. I thought I had done better than that. I thought I had gotten the book out soon after it came out. Obviously not. I had the 5th printing. Just to show you perspective and just how popular this book is, here's a paperback edition of it, printed edition of it, currently available. And when you look at the numbers here, they are 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. 24th printing of Henry Hikes to Fitchburg. That's how popular this book is. Isn't that cool? Do you know how many authors would lust after that? Including yours truly, to have 24 printings of a book. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Now, what we are going to look at today are these picture book kind of books for children. There are other Thoreau books for children, both specifically about him and about characters that have been inspired by him. And I'm saving that for the next episode, okay? So books for middle grade readers and graphic novels for older readers, all of that's going to be in the next episode, all righty? Now, pet peeve number 1. Just because these books are for children does not mean that they should be sacrificing fact for the sake of telling a good story. Don't you agree? You know, if you're going to have a historic character, even if the story is sort of made up, a fictionalized historical fiction about this character, this famous person, don't you think at least the basic facts should be accurate? Yes, please. Okay. And so that's what I'm going to touch on a little bit with a lot of these things. And then you'll see it too. But be a discerning reader. Okay. Be a discerning viewer. You know enough about Henry by now. You know enough to pick up one of these books and say, well, that's not quite, yeah, you know, okay? So before you hand one of these books to a child, grandchild, niece, nephew, other young person in your life, take a gander at it first, okay? And that's just general advice, not just about books about Henry, but general advice. You know enough to know whether these are going to be accurate. And again, I'm going to show you one that I believe is a misrepresentation, and I have a feeling you're going to agree. Pet peeve number 2. This is my my plea to all artists and illustrators out there. This, folks, is the way you hold a flute. You do not hold it like this. You never hold it like this. And you see this mouthpiece here? See this mouthpiece? You blow across it. The air goes across it. You do not put your mouth directly on the instrument or at the end of the instrument. This is not a recorder, okay? This is a flute. You think Henry rocked Bach like Ian Anderson at Walden when he was at Walden? I sure hope so. Don't you? And now, I should take that out sometime. The acoustics at Walden are great. I should take that out sometime. Okay, and now you're going to say, really, Corrine, what does it matter what the flute likes in the book? And no, I say, if the artist is getting that wrong, what else are they getting wrong? Okay, and a flute has come down in history. You know, you can look at Henry's flute in the Concord Museum. You can look on their website. You can look in David Wood's book about the Thoreau collection at the museum. There's a lovely picture of his flute. It was wood. It was not metal like this, and it didn't have as many keys and as many functions. It was wood, and it just had holes. It didn't have keys, and it's got ivory bands on it. But it's the same process, and you can see on the headpiece, you can see engravings of the names of the family members who played the flute, and you can see at the edge of that mouth, where what is now the mouthpiece, you can see a discoloration in the wood where the oils from a human lip have settled. So again, that's pet peeve number 2. Get the flute correct. Thank you. Stepping off soapbox now. All right, now let's start into our picture book collage here, and we are going to start with books that actually use Henry's own words as the text. So we go back to 1974, and What Befell at Mrs. Brooks's, which is a journal entry from Thoreau's journal of March 19th, 1856. And they are illustrated by George Overley. It's in very simple text, obviously. And what this is a vignette from one of Henry's neighbors. Somebody fell downstairs. Other people tried to help the person. They fell in puddles. It's a comedy of errors story, all right? Didn't happen to Henry. It happened to somebody in his neighborhood, and he heard about it and wrote about it in his journal. And for some odd reason, this publisher decided to make it part of a series of funny vignettes from famous people. So the other people in the series are Ben Franklin, Edgar Allan Poe, and Mark Twain. And here we have Henry's neighbors. Okay, but it is the actual journal entry from them. Again, kind of weird that it's in a children's book. You know, basic children's illustrations from 1974. But we can do better now, right? We can do better now. Here's another book that uses journal entries, and it's called New Suns Will Arise. There's the cover, a little difficult to see the title because of the barcode from the library. New Suns Will Arise, from the journals of Henry David Thoreau, with photography by John Dugdale. And so every double page spread here is a journal entry with a blue tinged photograph. And the reason I borrowed this from the library system is because it is classified as children's literature. It is classified as juvenile literature. Library of Congress classified it that way, and every library after that just goes along with that thing. But it is not. I'm going to tell you right now, this is not for kids, okay? Journal entries and photographs, it's an illustrated quote book. I will accept it as that, but you know how Henry writes. You know, not all of his journal entries are child friendly, okay, shall we say, or understandable. I mean, yeah, they're understandable to us. For example, here's a double page spread. It's a short entry that I'll read to you, and it's from his journal of August 13th, 1838. I am from the beginning, knowing no end, no aim. No sun illumines me, for I dissolve all lesser lights in my own intense and steadier light. I am a restful kernel, that's Kernel. I am a restful kernel in the magazine of the universe. I'm not making a face at Henry. I'm making a face at, this isn't a children's book? Really? No. I'm going to say that right now. No, this is an illustrated quote book, and it might appeal to you with the blue tinged photographs and the whole premise of it. It's not a children's book. I'm going to have it on the list, but I'm going to put a disclaimer. It's not a children's book. So if you want another illustrated quote books, and boy, did we need another illustrated quote book from Thoreau? Anybody can do them. You know. If you don't, go back to the quote book episode. Okay. So let's go to the ones that really make sense. This one's called Walden. All right. And the selections from Walden were chosen by Steve Lowe, and Robert Sabuda did the illustrations, and they take text from Walden and have Henry tell his story of how he went to the pond. And here's, morning is when I am awake, and there is a dawn in me. Kind of old-timey kinds of illustrations. Nice. Let's Henry tell the story of how he went to Walden. He's playing the flute, but the way you look at it, you can't tell whether that's done correctly or not. Boy, I sure hope it is. Anyway, you may be interested in knowing that the introduction about Henry was written by Anne McGrath of the Thoreau Lyceum in Concord, and she knew her stuff. She's not around anymore, sadly, but yeah, so that's kind of neat. Another picture book that lets Henry tell his story from excerpts from Walden is Henry David's House. And here the selections were chosen by Stephen Schnurr, and here Peter Fiore did the illustrations. This one, very colorful. Peter Fiore's illustrations kind of remind me of N.C. Wyeth's in Men of Concord. Just seems to be that kind of same style. Beautiful, evocative, slightly, impressionistic maybe. I don't know my art all that well. But yeah, this is nice. Henry David's House. Again, excerpts from Walden where Henry explains what he did. Same thing with A Year in the Woods. This one came out in 2017, Henry's bicentennial year. The selections from Walden were chosen by Laura Manaresi, and these beautiful, colorful, simple illustrations are by Giovanni Manna. And it boils down Henry's Walden experience even in more simpler terms. It's beautiful. This one, because it's still new, relatively, still in print. Beautiful little book to hand to a young person. Beautiful little book. So those are the books that use Henry's own words as the text, and somebody selects them, and then somebody else, draws the illustrations. So now let's move on to the books that take stories from Henry's own life. And of course, we're going to start with the Henry books, as we call them in the biz. The Henry books by D.B. Johnson, Don Johnson, and Henry Hikes to Fitchburg is the first one, came out in 2000. All right, and this one is based on that one paragraph from the first chapter of Walden, where Henry seems to be challenging somebody to a race of sorts. Is it faster and more meaningful to walk from Concord to Fitchburg, or to earn enough money to take the train and go in comfort later and convenience later? Did he actually take that challenge and race somebody from Concord to Fitchburg? We don't know. We don't have evidence, hard evidence to say that he did, but here he does. And Don has transformed Henry into a bear character, and that's what he uses throughout this series. So Henry Hikes to Fitchburg is first. It's a great story. Like I said, obviously wildly popular. And it is followed by Henry Builds a Cabin. Pretty obvious what Henry does here, right? Henry Climbs a Mountain. Perhaps not as obvious. This one is really about Henry's night in jail. I can't tell you any more than that. I know it, but I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read it yourself. The next one is Henry Works, where for a whole day we go around and we follow Mr. Thoreau and what he's doing and all of the things that he does in Concord and in the landscape, just in case you didn't know what he did for work or that he was actually working. And then the last one in the series is Henry's Night with Don. Don wrote with his wife, Linda, and here Henry takes a moonlight walk, and we go along with him and see what we can see and the colors are muted because it's dark. And what are we gonna find in the nighttime? Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. Now, all of these books, all 5, have been re-released in paperback in this horizontal format, okay? So that they all will match on your shelf or on your coffee table. Okay, and Don D.B. Johnson still illustrates, still producing little stories, illustrated stories. He does this on Facebook and on his own website. You can find him at www.dbjohnsonart.com. So that's that. Thanks again, Don. Now, another artist author who has been quite prolific in recent years is Donna Marie Szyboyewski. And this is one of her picture books. Henry David Thoreau loved the seasons of the year. Donna Marie is a teacher in Ohio, and she wanted a quick, a way to share with her students who Henry was and what he was all about. And so she does the text and she draws the pictures. So, and her books are always colorful. Donna Marie has, like I said, she's been quite prolific. I'm only going to show you 2 of her books right now. The others will be in the next episode because some of them are for more older readers is what the word is. And yeah, older readers, and they're not really in this picture book format. Yeah, so that's the first one. Serves as a good introduction to Henry. Henry David Thoreau loved the seasons of the year. And then, because Donna Marie likes visiting the American Southwest, she did a what if book. And if Henry David Thoreau traveled the Southwest, an imaginary saunter. And so she's got Henry exploring a habitat that he never actually explored in real life, but that's okay. That's okay. What would he have done? What would he have seen? How would he have reacted to a totally different natural environment than what he was used to? So if you have a young person, if you live in that region, or you have a young person in your life who lives in that region, this would be a decent introduction to Henry, placing him in your own environment. Okay. So that's Donna Marie Szyboyewski and her stuff. Okay. So now the rest of the books that we're going to look at are standalone volumes, and they are still stories. They take the essence of Henry and create stories about him or put him in situations. Okay, the first one is called Walking with Henry, based on the life and works of Henry David Thoreau by artist and author Thomas Locker. Right away from the cover, doesn't that look like a Hudson River landscape painter work? Well, there's a good reason for that. Thomas Locker lived in the same area and was influenced by the Hudson River painters, Hudson River School painters. And here you can see Henry there. He has Henry walking in the mountains on an imaginary walk, so to speak. It's kind of a fictitious walk. Doesn't really say where he's going. Just, he's going to the mountains. Sure looks like the Hudson River Valley. That's okay. Beautiful. It's got him finding a really big waterfall. Could be Catterskills Falls. It's not mentioned, but if Thomas Locker's in the Catskills, well, not anymore. He's sadly not longer with us, but now in this one, he's got Henry at the waterfall, but he also has deer and bear. If Henry saw a deer, it was only once. He never saw a bear. So we're sort of getting fictionalized here. And then he has him seeing a moose. And yeah, the only time he saw a moose was on one of those, Maine woods excursions when he was with the Native Americans. So yeah, kind of fabricating things there, but that's okay. That's okay. It's emphasizing, as long as you know what's happening here. It's emphasizing going out and walking and seeing what you can see, and the fact that this guy felt that walking and seeing nature was important. It's a beautiful book. Yeah, beautiful book. So it's kind of fictionalized, but still emphasizes, one of the core essences of Henry, going out and seeing things, experiencing nature. Yeah. Next up, Henry and the Huckleberries, a visit with Mr. Thoreau at Walden Pond, written by Sally Sanford, illustrated by Ilsa Plume. And this is a merry little story that 3 children go to visit Henry at his house at Walden. There's Henry. And the 3 children are named Louisa, Edward, and Monty. And they are based on Louisa May Alcott, Edward Emerson, and Moncure Conway. Woo-hoo! When's the last time you heard that name, huh? So the children go to visit Henry, and he takes them on a huckleberry picking party. And something happens, and Mr. Thoreau has his own way of considering things, not like everybody else, which is great, as we know. And so it's a colorful, very merry story. Henry and the Huckleberries, right? Yeah. And this one came out in 2016, actually. Yeah. Speaking of Henry seeing things a little bit differently than everybody else, we've got The Trouble with Henry, A Tale of Walden Pond, written by Deborah O'Neill and Angela Westengard and illustrated by S.D. Schindler. And of course, the trouble with Henry, there's Henry at the pond. The perceived trouble with Henry is that he just doesn't think the way the townspeople do. You know, he doesn't value the same material possessions they do. He built that house out at Walden Pond. What was that all about? I mean, what are you going to do with this guy? So there are big plans. You know, we're going to ignore him when he comes in on the street. There are big plans for Walden Pond, unfortunately, here. Someone is intending to build a toothpick factory. Ah! That's what they think these trees are good for? Making toothpicks? How's Henry going to combat that? Well, he invites the crowd down to the pond to see it and to see the beauty of nature and how wonderful this place is. And once they see it, yay! Walden Woods is saved. Fictitious story, but you know, cool. And of course, there is no trouble with Henry, right? Right. It's a fictitious story, but still kind of cool. And there's Henry. Hand this to a young environmentalist, and they should like that. They should like that. Now let's go back in time to 1985, and we have A Man Named Thoreau by Robert Burley with illustrations by Lloyd Bloom. They are black and white. They are muted but evocative. And this is really a biography. You can see how much text there is. This is really a biography of Henry, an illustrated biography for younger readers. So technically, maybe not in this picture book category, but I'm showing it to you because Robert Burley is a Thoreau fan. And with this book, he was not done with Henry, or maybe Henry was not done with Robert Burley, because in 2012, Robert Burley teamed up with Wendell Miner to create If You Spent a Day with Thoreau at Walden Pond. It's a beautiful color picture book. Like I said, came out in 2012. And instead of creating a story or just telling about his life, this is sort of a what if. What if you spent time with Henry? What if you were a young person and you went to visit him at the pond? What would you do? What would you see? Wendell Miner's illustrations always remind me of the ones that Garth Williams did for the Little House books back in the day. They're soft and they're beautiful. You would go do all these cool things. It's simply a beautiful book. It is my favorite of everything that I'm showing you here today. It is my favorite. If you have this book, hug it, cherish it, because in 2020 it went out of print and there is seemingly no way to bring it back. Even though we at the shop at Walden Pond conquered the publisher and said we'd really like more copies, even though Wendell Miner and his wife Florence contacted the publisher and said we would really like more copies, they said no. And so it is now exceedingly difficult to get this book. You can get it on a Kindle. Nah, it's not the same. It's not the same. If you don't already have a copy of this book, I'm sorry. Try it on a Kindle. Borrow it from a library so you can at least enjoy it temporarily. If you ever see it at a used book dealer or on a library book sale table, snap it up, scoop it up immediately. Even if you don't want it, someone else will online and they will pay generously for it. If you have a copy. Oh, I didn't even show you the fly leaves. Wendell's map of Walden. Oh, if you have a copy, I implore you, please consider putting a note in the front of it that says to your children and grandchildren, do not throw this book away. Do not give this book away. It may be worth a lot of money. And I am not kidding. I am not kidding. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful book. But like I said, publisher decides. Publisher decides. So what about the other conquered authors? Don't they get picture books too? Aren't there other books? Aren't there books written for children about the other conquered authors? Well, yeah. Louisa May Alcott, I could do a whole episode on her. I will not. I save that for somebody else. But children's books for Louisa, especially because Little Women is aimed at young readers, you know, where Walden is not quite. So Louisa attracts a lot more children's books than anybody else. So let's show one of hers. And this one makes sense to show. It's Louisa May and Mr. Thoreau's Flute, written by Julie Dunlap and Mary Beth Lord Becky, with pictures by Mary Azarian. And right off the bat, look, Mary Azarian got the flute right. Yay! And of course, since this is focused on Louisa, right, we go to her household. All right, we go to her household and we see what they're up to. And then she goes to Walden and goes on a huckleberry picking party with Henry. And he takes his flute along and he serenades while they pick the, oh, and the flute is right. Yay! Yay. And Louisa, you know, she wants to be a writer and she knows Mr. Thoreau is a writer. Oh, there he is again. And the flute is right. Yay. She wants to be a writer too. And by the end of the book, she is. She creates her own first poem at the age of 8. Now, you know, the real Louisa actually did write a poem called Thoreau's Flute as a tribute to Henry after he died in 1862. And it appeared in the Atlantic Monthly issue of September 1863. You can find it online. I'm kind of surprised they didn't include it here because of the topic. It's not necessarily a poem for children that children would understand, but yeah, my suggestion is I would have put it in the back of the book, but no, but still, cool book. Cool flute. Yep. Cool flute. How about any other conquered author? Well, we got 2 about the Emersons. All right. First one is A Home for Mr. Emerson, written by Barbara Curley, illustrated by Edward Fotheringham, came out in 2014. And this is, since it's a home for Mr. Emerson, it's about, it's a biography of him. Here he is as a little kid. How about that? In case you wanted to see Waldo as a little kid, there he is. Tells about meeting Lydian. There's meeting Lydian. So it's a biography of Emerson based around that big white house in Concord. Does not mention his first wife, but hey, I guess maybe that's not kid friendly. There's the big white house. No, so it's a biography, and lots of Emerson phrases and quotes in here, especially on the fly leaves. Lots of his stuff. It also includes, if I can get my fingers on it, also includes the time that his house burned and the townspeople helped save his library. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. And he, you know, he was a writer and a lecturer. Here he is flying on a book. Good metaphor and analogy there. You could write about. Doesn't everybody want to fly on a book? So, a home for Mr. Emerson. And then the other Emerson book to show is Mr. Emerson's Cook by Julie Byron Shackner. Came out in 1998. This is a real life story of Annie Burns. She was from Ireland, and she came over and she got the job as being the cook in the Emerson household. And so this tells about what she sees at the Emerson house and her relationship with them, which is pretty good. And Mr. Thoreau is in here at least once. And one of the coolest things about this book is that Judith, the author, is the great granddaughter of Annie Burns. And so this is a great tribute not only to the Emerson house, but also to her ancestor who had a connection with them. So again, pretty darn cool. Now, so that's it for the picture books. There's one more book I want to show you. It's not quite in this format, but it is for young people and younger than picture books. All right. And it's the one I'm not going to recommend. And once you see it, you will understand why. And I want to talk about format first. Okay. This particular book, this is not the book I don't like. This particular book is just a sample of a board book that I want to show you, all right? Because I want to explain to you what a board book is. This is called Stick and Stone. It is a bilingual book with Spanish, so it is also called Palo y Piedra. And it is a board book for young people, and it's about a stick and a stone, and obviously they're quite different people, shall we say, with different aims and goals. And they get into some scrapes each other and they help each other out. And so by the end, they become fast friends, of course. Great little book, great little story. So a board book, these are all coated cardboard pages, okay? Coated cardboard so that little fingers who can't do the paper pages can turn these. And if these fingers happen to be sticky, or if there happens to be a drink nearby or food, my goodness, near a book, easy to scrape off, easy to wipe off. So board book for little people. Okay, that's what a board book is. So surely we should have a board book about Henry David Thoreau, right? Introduce the youngest readers with the fingers to Henry. Okay, so a few years ago, the publisher Gibbs Smith started producing a series of books about naturalists aimed in board book format at the youngest readers, and they call this series Little Naturalists, okay? Because the readers are little, not because the people who are the subjects of the books are little. Okay, so in this series are people like John Muir, Beatrix Potter, Georgia O'Keeffe, Ansel Adams, Jane Goodall, John James Audubon, Johnny Appleseed, and Henry David Thoreau. Some of those people are not the typical ones that you normally find in series where talk about people who have a connection with nature, but that's pretty cool that they include, you know, artists and photographers as they should. Okay, so I want to print one for Henry. Now, you've already seen examples of what Henry looks like in illustrated form, right? For young people. How would you depict Henry? How would you draw him? Okay, even if you don't draw, how would you draw him? You know what he looked like. You know what other artists have depicted him as. You've seen the 1856 daguerreotype millions of times. You've probably seen the 1861 ambrotype with the full beard many times. You know what he looked like in real life. Okay, let me show you this. I hope you're sitting down. Is this what you would have come up with? Henry David Thoreau in the Woods by Kate Combs with illustrations by Seth Lucas. Really? Are you kidding me? He's a Scandinavian lumberjack? How? That's my question. How? How do you transform Henry into this? I I just don't even get it. Now the text itself isn't bad, but really, are we supposed to take this seriously? When he's building his cabin, he's hefting the rafters onto his own sturdy shoulders with the mouse at the end. Really? Um, uh, I just don't even. I just don't even. Okay, here's the Battle of the Ants. There are two of them, and they're both the same color. Okay. Okay. Here he is playing the flute. He's got his mouth on the end of the flute. No, uh, uh, okay. Number one, can we be accurate, please? I mean, yeah, it's a story and it's boiled down to the youngest of the young, but can we be accurate and not blonde? Number two, the flute. So no, no, just no, no. We need another one. Okay, that's your assignment. Draw a better one, please. Okay. All the other books that I mentioned are on travelswiththoreau.com and on the link below. Oh, just no, no, no. Let's be accurate. I mean, even if you're creating a fictitious story or boiling it down to the basics, can we at least have accuracy? Is that too much to ask? Uh, I hope my comments were helpful to you. I hope you enjoyed this colorful array of picture books. There's some great ones in there. Oh, and if you spent a day at Walden Pond, treasure it always, really. So next time, books for slightly older readers, including graphic novels, including more of Donna Marie's work. And I'll see you then. In the meantime, subscribe to this channel with the red button below, ring the bell for notifications, leave a comment. What do you really think of this one, huh? I'd love to know. And if you disagree with me, I'd love to know. Explain to me why. Explain to me why. So yes, so next time we will do some more of the children's book stuff, and then we'll be on to other topics. There's, as you know, a lot to cover with Henry. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Studying Thoreau. My name's Corinne Smith. Take care, and I'll see you next time.